Welcome to Not This, Not That, where we push our boundaries of understanding and perception. I am your host, Reverend Patricia Caginello, and I invite you to join me as we open to the possibility that things may not be exactly as you believe, as you've been told, that there could be more, that in our collective consciousness is the potential for the all. You can find Not This, Not That on the Sacred Stories podcast on sacredstoriesmedia.com and on iTunes and all streaming services. Click to subscribe and join us each show. So today we are expanding our boundaries of understanding on the topic of embodiment for empaths. We're speaking with Reverend Stephanie Redfeather, author of her new book, The Evolutionary Empath, A Practical Guide for Heart-Centered Consciousness. As an ordained shamanic minister, Stephanie's passion is to help fellow empaths embrace their soul's calling to evolve humanity to the next stage of consciousness. Stephanie is the founder of Blue Star Temple, where she has led experiential workshops, initiatory processes, and private facilitation since 2007. You can find out more at bluestartemple.org. And so I'd like to say it is my absolute delight to welcome Stephanie Redfeather to Not This, Not That.
Thank you so much, Patricia. I'm happy to be here.
You know, I'm excited that you're here. I'm excited you're on Not This, Not That, so we can really dig a little bit deeper into the topic of empaths and specifically on the topic of embodiment today.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important, on a personal level. I was at a workshop recently, and there was a lot of energy swirling all around, and people were doing some pretty deep processes and deep releasing. And I kept hearing over and over from the facilitator, stay in your body, stay in your body, stay in your body. And I just found that really fascinating because it made me think of you, and it made me think of the topic we're going to discuss today, the idea of embodiment. And I think that's what she was asking people. She was asking them, not to leave, right? Not to go out of their body. So is that what you mean when you talk about embodiment and the processes of embodiment specifically for empaths?
Yes, and it's I have a simple definition for embodiment, but it really is a multi-layered concept. But to define it simply, the most simple synonym for embodiment is presence. And so in any given moment, if you're fully present on all levels, so mental, physical, emotional, energetic, etc., then you can pretty much be assured that you are in your body. And then I think of embodiment as stringing together moments of full presence for longer and longer periods. And so when you're sharing that experience with the facilitator, I so know exactly what she's talking about because I facilitate similar work and have said those same words before too, of stay in your body. I'll just go into a little bit more about that. I acknowledge that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So we are at once divine and human. And one is not better than the other, but a lot of our cultural, spiritual dogma, religious traditions tend to focus on the upward movement of energy through the body, the transcendence, the transcending the, quote, lower emotions or the desires of the body, all in an effort to experience oneness, nirvana, etc. And from my point of view, that is only half of the point. It's like if our purpose in embodying as a human being was to go back to spirit, then why did we incarnate in the first place? We could have just stayed in spirit form. So clearly, at least in my perspective, there is a reason we came into a body to experience the human element and everything that that implies. And so I don't think being grounded or in your body is more important than your practices to connect to spirit. I think they are equally important because, and I actually focus more on embodiment and being in your body to help balance out all of these centuries of practices and teachings that would have us leave our bodies, if you will, to experience transcendence and become one with spirit again.
So the idea, and I agree, and it's interesting, and we'll come back to this in a moment, but even through a practice of yoga, I was doing Ashtanga yoga a few years ago, and I actually, at that point, finally, I think, really got the concept of full embodiment and the merging of the body and spirit, or spirit in the body, and the body as a tool, or the body as a vehicle for that experience. And that was super, super powerful. But before we dive into that a little bit more, let's just go back to the example, though, because I think that that's what's really prevalent today, especially for empaths, because empaths are feeling, right, energies and experiencing energies with a higher sensitivity than maybe somebody who is not an empath. And so is there almost that kind of that fight or flight mechanism that kicks in for empaths, and it's not that they're physically running away from something, but they actually detach from their body when they are experiencing some intense energies? Is that and is that why, like in this workshop or in your workshops, you say stay in the body? Is that what people energetically flee? Is that what's happening?
Yes, and it is a defense mechanism, a coping mechanism. It's something that the psyche employs in moments of danger. So to leave your body is not just to leave your body as a neutral event. It's not good or bad. It is a coping mechanism. It's something that you've heard people, I'm sure, talk about an experience of an accident where they left their body, they're hovering over the scene of the accident, or they're hovering over themselves in the hospital room. People leave their bodies in moments of horrible atrocities. So, sexual abuse, physical abuse, people who have experiences of being kidnapped or witnessing atrocities of war. It's a protective measure so that we don't, it's overwhelming. The psyche recognizes that whatever's happening in the moment is too big to process, it's too much, it's too horrible, it's too whatever. And so we're just going to take the life force energy and the consciousness, and we're going to move it out of the body and just kind of leave enough in the body to sort of be functional, barely functional, but we're just going to move that consciousness to protect the human and to protect the psyche. That in itself is not necessarily a bad thing. It's when that becomes a permanent solution. And usually it's happening unconsciously because, when we're young and we're making unconscious decisions about our life and developing our beliefs and developing our strategies, we're not usually doing that with a level of consciousness. So, of course, to be in the body is to experience the pain and the trauma and the unresolved issues and the wounding and the overstimulation and the overwhelm and all of those things.
So when empaths or individuals, but we're speaking more specifically to empaths because they have a higher sensitivity, right, to the energies. When they are, let's say, in a workshop or in a process, and they are releasing or experiencing or moving into a place of a greater awareness of things through processes, why would it be important to stay in the body, to be, maintain embodiment at that point? What is the benefit for an empath to do that?
It really, honestly, it depends on the individual's value system. It depends on what's important to them. For me, it is important to face my traumas, my woundings, my unresolved issues. But I can't convince somebody, I can tell you why I think it's important, but it's really an individual choice. Um, if you're not in your body, you can't heal the human wounds. You can't deal with the karmic patterns, the past life traumas, all of these things. So what we carry in our physical body is not just from this lifetime. There are often um, cellular memories from past lifetimes as well. And if we're not in our body, then we can't deal with those things. And to deal with those things, I'm not saying you must feel them. It's not like, okay, we're going to recreate the experience and you have to feel all of that trauma and pain and grief all over again. But you have to in some degree, be connected to it, to recognize it, to feel it, so that you can locate where it is. So for example, when I do work with people, oftentimes I will ask them, where in your body do you feel this? Where, if it was centered in some area of your body, where is it centered? And then I'll even ask them questions. How does it feel? Is there a texture? Is there a color? Describe it. And so if you're not in your body, then you don't have access to these very critical clues that are going to help you process through these issues.
So that brings us kind of back to the example that I was mentioning I experienced through yoga, kind of that union and the body being a vehicle, right, for experience and to your point, for healing. So just dig into that a little bit more for us as far as the body's ability to hold the memories or bring forth trauma through generations. A lot of times people will talk about even in healing ancestral energies, absolutely, and so forth, and we could be holding them. I remember years ago I was speaking with someone and he was explaining to me, it was kind of my very first toe dipping into the spiritual waters, and he was saying, how the religious concept is, the seven sins of the seven fathers, the generations, right? 7 generations carry forward. Biologically, we'll say, oh, it's came through in your DNA. God even knows what that really means, and spiritually, we'll talk about healing the ancestral wounds, the energies that come forward, when in essence, we're really all talking kind of about the same thing, and the body is the storehouse, right? Or the way we experience that. So just dig into a little bit more as far as like what that actually means. Are we actually energetically holding this in our body? And when we stay embodied as we go through these processes, is that a way to help us, heal those 7 sins of the 7 generations of fathers?
Yeah, this is such a juicy conversation. There's a lot of pieces to it. If you subscribe to the belief that everything in the world is energy, then these ancestral patterns, these lineage pieces, these past life pieces, they all have a frequency or vibration. And then your own experiences of trauma, wounding, etc. in this lifetime, they all are vibrating at a particular frequency. So they exist in your energy field. And if they stay unresolved, they begin to lower in vibration and will actually start to manifest physically as symptoms of disease or illness or some kind of affliction. And so the body has memory. So in terms of like psychological or physical development of a human being, we have so many memories that are pre-verbal. And so that's why it's one of the reasons that talk therapy can only access so much, because cognitively, we have a lot of memories stored in the body that occurred before we were able to form language or words or experience the world in that way. And when we bring these past life pieces in, it's more in it exists in the feeling body, the somatic body. And so working with these things on a physical level, having processes, and there's so many awesome modalities out there that help access things on those levels, on the non-verbal levels, if you will. And so as we can heal these things, I just see each one of these pieces as bringing us closer to wholeness. Because when we have unresolved issues, when we have pieces that we're ignoring or suppressing or pretending that they're not there, they exist, but they exist in the shadow. And my short definition of the shadow is the disowned, unloved parts of ourselves. We're unconscious of them. We've somewhere along the way, it's been decided that these behaviors or these ideas or whatever were not acceptable, and so we kind of cleave them off from the whole, and they go back down into the shadow. And so the more we can heal these pieces and resolve these pieces, the more we can stand solidly in our grounded, authentic self and return to wholeness, bring those pieces back into the fold.
So for our listeners, and for me as well, I learn so much all the time with speaking with, individuals like yourself, Stephanie. What are some tools or strategies that you would tell people when they are in the presence, trying to maintain presence, mm-hmm. and stay embodied, when they understand that they're in a process and they're consciously choosing to work through it, through the body as well? How would you help them to do that? Because mm-hmm. just being told stay in your body,
right, that doesn't necessarily mean something.
it might not mm-hmm. be enough direction. So
yeah.
So how do people stay in the body or maintain that embodiment that we're speaking
mm-hmm.
of?
The first tool I'm going to go to almost every time is the breath. So if I am working with somebody and I can tell that whatever they're experiencing as they're connecting into a trauma or some event, that it's becoming overwhelming, that the emotions are building, I can tell they're wanting to leave their bodies. A lot of times I'll touch them, so if I have permission, I might hold on to the lower part of the body, put my hands on their feet, just to help remind them where their feet are, so that they can, in a way, it's almost like holding them, not forcing them, but holding them on this plane, reminding them to stay, kind of drop their roots, but to breathe it through. Whatever the pain is, just let the breath be the vehicle to move that emotion so it doesn't get stuck, so it doesn't build up like a pressure cooker. You can use your breath to direct that energy and let it flow through, release it to the earth, etc. And there are some other tools that I would do if I had a person in front of me that I was working with. But the psyche is amazing in that, there are parts that get created that are protector parts. And so when those horrific wounds and traumatic events get triggered, when we're accessing them, a lot of times those protector parts come online, and quite literally their point of view is, don't go there, you're going to die. And so sometimes it can be an amazing experience just to be with the experience, breathe through it, stick with it long enough, because it will always run its course. Whatever the intense emotion is, it will always run its course. There will be a beginning, a middle, and an end to it. And just the person experiencing themselves breathing, moving the energy and then experiencing the end of that cycle, that part in the psyche goes, huh, we didn't die. So that may seem very simplistic, but it can actually be a very powerful experience, and an experience towards helping them heal and gain confidence.
I love the idea that if you're with someone, that you touch them, and touch their feet, because I think that in itself is a very grounding process. It's a connection. So you're connecting them back, right? Just by the process of touch. I'm wondering, if nobody is with you, if that is also something that we can do for ourselves as a way to help ground, is to physically touch our body or hold on to something. You know what I mean? Would you?
Yes. Yeah, and I work with the rock and mineral kingdom a lot, and so I have specific stones that I use for grounding, that I might, if I'm sitting, that I might sort of, tuck between my legs, or actually put on the floor and have my feet touch them, or, so it requires some prepping ahead of time if you're getting ready to take yourself through a process, like, okay, what do I need? Sometimes I will create a circle around myself. I'll grab a bunch of crystals and make a circle, so, energetically I'm inviting in my guides and helpers and higher self. But if I physically create a circle around me, it helps me feel a little more safer, like I can physically see this thing that represents this protective, stand of benevolent beings. So yeah, there are definitely things that you can do if you're trying to work through process yourself.
And breath. So many people speak to different ways of breathing. What type of a breath or breath work would you recommend?
Most of the time, if we're playing in the realm of embodiment and staying in the body, it's going to be a focus on the exhale, moving down the body. There's several pieces of it, so let me just back up. So I'm going to probably invite the person to breathe in through their feet, through their roots, so that they're actually pulling up earth energy, grounded energy, up through their body, up all the way to the crown. And then in the exhale, thinking of it like a waterfall, or somebody, angels brushing you with wings, or those automatic cat litter boxes where every so often a little rake goes across the surface. It's like some whatever visualization works, so that with their exhale, they're releasing down their body, out through their feet, down through the roots, back into the earth, giving their energetic dross to Mother Earth, trusting that she is going to transmute it, just like manure becomes fertilizer.
I like that. So those are two processes that anyone can do. They don't need any special skills to be able to use those tools to stay in their body or maintain. Your definition of embodiment is presence over time, moments of presence over time. And I think that's a really beautiful way of even framing it or phrasing it. And I guess I would add or ask as well, I like the idea of its moments of presence. So it's not like we have to say, well, I'm going to just stay embodied forever, or I'm going to stay embodied for the next half an hour, or I'm going to, I'm going to stay in my body, or I'm going to breathe, or I'm going to touch, or I'm going to be present for this moment by moment. Would you agree that would be another way of maybe chunking it down?
Yeah, exactly. Breaking it down into smaller pieces, because it can be intimidating, especially if a person has been disembodied, if you will, for much of their life. Coming back into their body can be, in a way, a rude awakening. Like like turning every nerve cell up to volume 1000, because if you haven't been in your body to experience and feel everything, it can feel like razor blades sometimes. And so you just do what you can. And you know, I'm not of the belief that you must be embodied all the time, otherwise it doesn't count, or you're a bad person. It's like, that's bunk. You know, I am not embodied all the time. What's important is, are you conscious of it now? Because, you know, in the past, until we become aware of it, we're leaving our body unconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
So I leave my body, but I do it consciously. I give myself permission. You know, I check my schedule. What's going on? Do I have any obligations? Okay, I call it my stare out the window and drool periods, where I'm just like, okay, I need a break. I need a respite, but I'm doing it consciously. I'm providing a framework, and it's not an escape. That's where a person has to be careful, is if it becomes an addiction, if it becomes a regular habit, then there's something else to look at, because it's becoming an escape as opposed to, you know, a conscious break, if you will.
I love how you frame it that way, and I love the control or power that gives each of us. Because as we started the conversation, and you were saying we're divine beings, obviously in a human body, right? But that consciousness of the wholeness, or, you know, the expansiveness of really who we are, the topic of embodiment, and consciously choosing to be embodied and for what purpose, and to our benefit, that's incredibly empowering for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And to have that understanding, because I think what's happening a lot, especially to people who are just becoming aware of maybe what an empath is, or that they are an empath. You know, a lot of people, the terminology, they just know they feel a lot of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they may not really have the tools and the understanding of why they're feeling what they're feeling, and then what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
But to have a conversation around the topic of embodiment, and like you say, to consciously choose to use it at times for a purpose, and then other times to choose to leave your body for a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That's really powerful, Stephanie. That's really powerful for any individual, wherever they are on their spiritual journey.
Yeah. And there's a perspective I'd like to share, if I may, that feels important.
Sure.
You know, because I've had people tell me, it's like, you know, it's not worth it to me. Or why would I do it? I think I'm pretty good. You know, life is pretty good. And, you know, again, it goes back to what I was saying, is I can't make anybody do it. I can explain about it and describe it and give benefits and tools, but a person really has to be self-motivated to decide that is important. And for the person who says, well, I'm fine up to this point, I would ask, are you really? You know, and I would use the example, there's a lot of diseases and conditions in, you know, medicine, where the change over time is so slow, the degradation, if you will, or the loss of an ability is so gradual that you don't notice the difference. And so, you know, forgive the morbid example of the boiling frog, but if you put a frog in boiling water, it's immediately going to register, hey, this is hot, and jump out. But if you put a frog in tepid water and very slowly turn up the temperature, the frog is not going to register the change, and it will boil to death. And so I just offer that as a way of considering how much, you know, to what degree you have become disembodied, possibly through your life.
Yeah, no, that's a really good, even if it's a morbid example, it's a great illustration, right, of
Mhm.
what we get used to. So Stephanie, your book, The Evolutionary Empath, The Practical Guide to Heart-Centered Consciousness, speaks about embodiment. It has
Mhm.
information on embodiment in your book, and I would encourage everyone to check it out. Tell us a little bit more about your book, The Evolutionary Empath, and what else is in it that can
Mhm.
help highly sensitive souls that are empaths, and truly all of us, because
Mhm.
we all engage with energy every day, whether or not we have a high sensitivity or not. I believe that your book can be a really wonderful guide, for truly everyone.
I appreciate that. I have said that the unspoken subtitle of this book is Life Skills for an Evolving Species.
Mm,
Because that's,
it's true.
the tools that I offer, I think, are really valuable no matter where you feel you land on the empath spectrum. So for people unfamiliar with the book, I broke it into two parts. The second part is the rubber meets the road, practical 3D exercises and explanations and practices. So talking about what does it mean to be an energy being? What is our energetic container, and what are boundaries, and how do you apply them? And especially talking about two important boundary drawing examples, which is saying no and asking for what you need, and talking about embodiment and bringing in the masculine and feminine principles and how those are important and how they play in. So lots of really practical tools. The first half of the book is more about the bigger picture context. And I feel like that's a gift that I bring to the world, is the ability to have this higher level perspective and to provide context. I think empaths are here for a reason. I believe that we are. We, as humanity, are in a cycle of ascension, ascending consciousness, ascending awareness. And empaths are here to help humanity evolve to that next level of consciousness, because we come into the world with, kind of a slightly different energetic physiology and refined sensitivities. And so we are absolutely here on purpose, and you are not crazy. And I talk about the history of the empath. And I actually spend 2 chapters defining what an empath is, because when I sat down to write the book, the only guidance my spirit guides gave me was write a definition. I was like, oh, all right, that's a big task. But I did it. And I don't think I've seen anybody go to this level of detail in describing what it is to be an empath. So this is soup to nuts. It is high level to it's strategic and tactical, if you will, drawing from my military background, which I know you appreciate. And there's 8 really beefy guided meditations that accompany the book. There's a website in the book that you can go to. They're totally free, to help you with those experiential pieces, like we were talking about with all the embodiment stuff, like getting into your own body and having your own experience of a thing to derive your own wisdom and truth from it.
So the book is called The Evolutionary Empath, A Practical Guide to Heart-Centered Consciousness. And we've been speaking with Reverend Dr. Stephanie Redfeather. And Stephanie, remind our audience of your website, please, where they can find out more about you and all the wonderful work that you do.
Yes, thank you. I've got blogs and podcasts and all kinds of tools and stuff at bluestartemple.org.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie Redfeather. It's
Mm,
been, as always, just a delight to speak with you.
thank you so much.
And thank you to our audience for listening, for being with us. I am your host, Reverend Patricia Caginello, and you've been listening to Not This, Not That, available on the Sacred Stories podcast.